Refresh. I'm not hearing any
Nobody expects the person running the stream to be in the possibly in perpetuity. I might just let the song run out, and that's when we start. It's like like enough time. Alrighty, switch to that screen. Seems to be working. Can't remember how I usually begin. I am Silent or Uka Kisa, and I'm a political philosopher. The more important part for this episode, however, is the other co-host.
Oh, hey, I'm Cookie. I like alternate history, and where we left off the episode of Love Gods was right before we talked about the alternate history implications of the episode. I guess we can go right into it, but I am wondering if you have any particular thoughts regarding the alternate history of this world.
Not that I can immediately think of, other than the things they obviously spell out. Australia is probably a kind of superpower of this world. I would disagree with some aspects, but I think we might get into that, although I could just start out by saying them, I guess. So they begin by, or within the episode, they say that, like, all of the women between, like, what was it, Iraq and Australia or all the men there just all died. There's none left. Only ladies, I think is their term. And I kind of have kind of would disagree with the nature of that, because there should be if they're going off of, well, some people should be naturally immune to this biological weapon. People should be immune to this biological weapon, and there should be at least some in those regions.
So, I get the impression that the immunity was not a natural thing that men had at the point of its release. I think that there clearly was sort of like a center of impact, I guess, which was probably in Iraq, because the only areas that are specifically mentioned as having men are Australia and places in the Americas. While they're not terribly surprised at Otoro existing, British people existed in the Americas, before the 90s. So they probably would have just assumed, yes, there's a subset of people in the Americas that are immune. And, Australia somehow came out even ahead of the United States, but it makes sense that Australia, being pretty far removed, is a southern hemisphere, and also pretty far off to the east from the Middle East. And
It
the
is
United
nearly
States.
the antipode of where the thing was supposed to have been cut out.
Yeah, and the Americas being in a whole other hemisphere as well, across a pretty vast ocean. I'm inclined to say that maybe that's the biggest factor, which makes me think that the most then would actually be in South America, but South America doesn't come up. But I'd say that
Chile might
uh,
be really doing really well in this.
maybe
It has
I
the mountains on one side, a small population, as well as a giant giant-ass ocean on the other side.
yeah. And I suppose
And
what
it's
else
also near the
about home?
antipode. Sorry, I keep interrupting.
No, no, no. This is important stuff. It's near the antipode of,
Yeah, it's roughly
like,
in the like the antipode is roughly like right way between Chile and Australia.
yeah, yeah. That's kind of what I was thinking. The distance from the Y virus first release is probably a bigger factor than like random immunity. I'm not saying that in Europe or Africa there are no men, but I wouldn't be surprised if there were much fewer men there than they were even in the United States, where it seems as though there were pretty few men. And I think more than the demographics of the world, which I think is pretty straightforwardly explained, there's the question of how this biological weapon is made. And I think that we need to think about what the priorities of this world were before the bomb went off. It seems as though they aren't as advanced in matters of fertility. They lost, they either never had or lost any knowledge of in vitro fertilization with donor eggs and surrogates, and it's something that's not even explored, not even like artificial insemination, which is probably going to be a lot easier for the men than actually engaging in relations with the women. Now, there are a number of ways we can hand wave this away. We could say that, the men with the specialized knowledge simply died. Now, honestly, I think it's amazing that society was able to be coherent when nearly half of it just up and died. You think that certain male-dominated fields, like some of the electricians and whatnot, all dying would create a bit of a crisis, but that's neither here nor there. I'm not saying that this is the most realistic world building. You could also say that it's a means of political sort of placation, like giving these women access to men is a way for them to sort of control their, horny female population. I will accept those as valid explanations, but the fact that they specifically bring up this knowledge from our world and they just completely dismiss the possibility makes me think that this is a world that didn't spend as much time developing fertility technology and spent more time developing biological weapons.
I would get
And
there's a I guess maybe question I have about the world. So, assuming a world where nearly half of the entire population just ups and vanishes one day, or dies horribly over the course of a couple days, it I would think that they would be more interested in the development of differing ways of creation of pregnancies.
I mean, eventually, yeah. The question is like, is the technology available within the first few years? Because in this case, I forget if it says how many years ago it was, but I think we like put it around 5 years since the thing happened,
Yeah,
right?
they don't actually say how long ago it was, so we have to deduce that for ourselves. All
Yeah.
we know is it's, I guess, somewhat recently,
Mm.
due to the fact that
So
some of these people have been married and are still fairly young.
yeah. And so I'd say that they might be as much as decades behind in fertility science. And this is not even, considering the fact that they are radically adjusting their society and probably have, well, this is a high priority. Just staying functional as a society is also a pretty high priority. Uh,
Well, yeah, I would just think that like the people who are the professional scientists, even if they're women, would be like, maybe this is something we should look into.
Oh, absolutely. It's a matter of funding and just general like acquisition of resources to do these experiments. Especially if there's a shortage in women who are conceiving and pregnant to study, which there would be. I think it's reasonable to say that they're not going to suddenly catch up if, and I'm imagining a point of divergence maybe in the 50s or 60s, catch up with, just decades of progress that's kind of lost. On that, one of the big catalysts of fertility science was the thalidomide scandal. I actually learned about this since watching the episode, but it women in 46 different countries were prescribed a kind of tranquilizer that was believed to be just kind of helpful for them to carry the baby, and it led to a lot of defects. I could see this just not happening there, or there not being as much of a scandal or even a connection between this. And subsequently, there isn't as much of an immediate interest in studying sort of, I guess, fertility science. But we also need to talk about where the energy did go. And we do know that there was a Soviet Union biological weapons program that did largely peter out without any controversy. If this kind of thing was uncovered, I wouldn't be surprised if the United States dedicated a lot more of its scientific research for the following decades into their own biological weapons program. And when the international summit on against what was it, biological weapons, it just doesn't go as well, right? It doesn't result in people committing against biological weapons, ultimately culminating in this Y disease that emerges in Iraq and wipes out almost the entirety of the old world male population. At least this is the general trajectory I'm imagining. And
So something
so,
like they have biological weapons with poor phrasing, sorry, like similar to nuclear weapons. It's like they have biological weapons, so to protect ourselves, we also need it.
yeah, the same kind of mutually assured destruction doctrine.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wouldn't be surprised if there was sort of like a biological arms race, and this just led to some of this technology finding its way to Iraq. Now, it also touches on the kind of paranoia that the United States has regarding its main industrialized rival, Australia, where they are in constant competition and kidnapping one another's, male repopulation units. I just think it may be a matter of this is a bit more of a paranoid world. I also wouldn't be surprised if there was a bit more of a backlash against science and especially fertility science after the development of these kinds of biological weapons emerge. When you think about it, it actually is pretty controversial, even in our world. In vitro fertilization, especially because this oftentimes involves fertilizing some some eggs into embryos, but not necessarily using them all. I mean, I think in this particular circumstance, they would use them all and just have surrogate mothers for the unused embryos. But the idea of promoting research in this, I mean, people in our world kind of frame it a bit like abortion. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was like a religious backlash against science, and fertility science could have taken astray. Whether or not this would still be the case, like if people still hear the term in vitro fertilization and it's just politically unpalatable to a lot of people, I couldn't tell you. All we have is a Turo's perspective, and clearly this was more brought up as part of a gender narrative, where he's like describing objectification. If women were more interested in his brain cells than his sperm cells, then he thinks he can solve their problems in a generation. I mean, part of this is Arturo, thinking himself very smart. Except part of this is also, oh, hey, it doesn't feel so great being objectified. But if I were to put this in sort of the framing of, alternate history, I'd say that, just broadly speaking, there may have been sort of a cultural aversion to fertility science, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And again, a cultural inclination towards biological weapons, because even today, I don't think we have a biological weapon so potent that we could wipe out every man over the course of a few, in a few continents.
In only a very small span of time.
Mhm. And it's worth noting that as you go south of the United States, in Mexico, they don't seem to have these kinds of strong regulations with men. And part of this is that the competition seems to be between the industrial nations. So I'd imagine that the U.S., Canada, and Australia are sort of the main competitors here. Assuming that Europe is largely, depopulated of men.
Could also be a political strategy, like the U.S. is doing this forced. I don't remember what the word is, but it's doing all of this, and the Mexico could be doing not engaging in that in hopes of driving Americans to their country, which would increase their population, especially of males.
This is true. Actually, the Australian agent did try to appeal to Wade's conscience, saying that the way that the men are treated is awful. And so
I thought that was
see that as
an American agent.
Mm, well, it's framed like that's the reason why they found out about Wade, but then we see her again in the Australian embassy.
Okay, I can't
Unless
tell
I'm
these
mixing
people
it
apart
up.
apparently.
I could be making the mistake here, but I was under the impression that we're led to believe that the cops followed Wade to the house because of that. but
Yeah.
then later the Australians abduct her and we see that woman again. But maybe I could be misremembering.
Either way,
Uh,
the point does remain. Australia or the U.S. is recognizing that they are mistreating men.
yeah, and so there could be sort of like this political victory. But if we were to go with this sort of heat zone theory that we were kind of toying with earlier, it's also possible that, south of the border, especially when we get further south, there just isn't really as much of a shortage of men.
Yeah.
That the Mexico and Brazil and Colombia and all of those countries are simply as well off as Australia or better. And subsequently, they're just letting things happen. Or maybe, and this is a distinct possibility, they are doing what Arturo said, and so while men may have to make like regular donations, if you're doing it through in vitro, it's not like men have to be there constantly tending to, 5 or 6 women a day. But they do frame it as industrial countries competing with one another. So it's also possible that Australia, Canada, and the US just don't see Latin America as a threat right now. Ultimately, we don't have a lot of information.
Yeah. That is an unfortunate commonality amongst, like, all of the episodes. We're only given a small bit of information that is needed to drive the plot home.
What I'm hearing is that really every episode of Sliders should have its own Hearts of Iron 4 mod, where
Yes.
you need to play out according to that particular Sliders world, and we can sort of run the numbers and see how it goes.
Exactly. Get on this.
Yeah, Lord Dad, I know you watch our channel. You totally do, because we're the most famous Sliders discussion, alternate history analysis show. And hell, alternate history hub, you have enough clout, and I know you're watching us too. Get on it. Hearts of Iron mods, Victoria. Actually, Hearts of Iron mods who are watching this show. Um, but I am inclined to say that part of it may be the sort of political battle, and part of it may be that in Latin America they're just not as lacking in men. In fact, there's also a political strategy of if they're not taking those same sort of extreme measures as the U.S. and Australia, then the U.S. and Australia may not see them as much as competition. Putting it out there,
Yeah.
it's possible that if Mexico had a breeding program just like the United States, then the United States would be stealing their men too.
True.
But regardless, I suppose. Well, first, do you have any more thoughts or questions on this scenario that I've cooked up?
I guess I don't actually know the exact manner in which the disease is transmitted, if it's like airborne or waterborne or a combination of everything. It's entirely conceivable, at least presently, to myself, that maybe one of the least affected peoples are the North Sentinelese, who are able to just go about their day like literally nothing happened, or they're entirely screwed and this just kills them. What is it? Something like 300-ish uncontacted tribes around the world.
Yeah, a lot of them are in Papua New Guinea and
And Colombia.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's a source of some of Australia's men that give their numbers that make their numbers kind of high. We assume that these are just white Australians, but that might not necessarily be the case. They might be abducting slaves from Southeast Asia.
The
I say
majority of
slaves, patriots. Patriots is the
the
term.
the majority of, if I recall correctly, uncontacted tribes are in North, Western, South America, and Papua New Guinea.
Ah, yeah. I guess I also said that New Guinea is Southeast Asia. I guess it's Oceania. I don't know. The wildest line exists, so things get a little wonky there. But regardless, I think that it's entirely possible that some of the more remote parts of the world are unaffected. We may see Bhutan and Tibet like carrying on as they were, and they're just kind of like what we said with Mexico. They're not doing like their sort of repopulation program, and so maybe the industrial nations, specifically the U.S., Canada, and Australia, which we know have these programs, just don't view them as much of a threat because they're allowing repopulation to happen naturally. And it's specifically when they start sort of instrumentalizing it that they start viewing these nations as competitors. But yeah, it depends on the transmission of the disease. Now, if my theory that the further away you are from the initial blast, the safer you ultimately are, holds true. What about Puerto Rico? I have my own thoughts, but what are your thoughts?
Um, I guess yeah. This does rely on method of transmission and how affiliated cultures are. I could see a couple possibilities, like Puerto Rico being a United States thing if it's even further away. I could see the government just, you know, coming in and abducting all of the men and being like, okay, no more Puerto Ricans in Puerto Rico, except for the women, I guess. And um, alternatively, it could be that the U.S. decides that they need to focus on their own thing and they don't want to care about the Hispanic people or the people who are only like in the periphery, and so they just kind of let Puerto Rico go, just able to do it. It does its own thing. They don't care whether it succeeds or fails because they're concerned about the real Americans, air quotes. Um,
I really like that you bring that point up because this is a society that seems to be selective over at least the women that they want breeding. It seems as though they're less picky about the men, but you know, neither Quinn nor Arturo nor Rembrandt were Spanish speaking, so there's that aspect of it. Though it's worth noting, we're perfectly fine with Rembrandt, despite Rembrandt being black. We don't have any indicators that they are more reluctant to take on black men to repopulate than they are white men. But we do see that this society does have some eugenic tendencies.
yeah, I could see the U.S. Being, well, I don't know. The nature of eugenics makes it, and this being a different world makes it slightly more difficult for me to make declarative statements because like I could see U.S. Has saying that or upholding that. I don't know why I can't think of words at the moment. Black people, because it is a sizable portion of the U.S. that is Unfortunately, fairly often overlooked. But if suddenly there's a severe population crisis, they would become a very important subgroup. Um,
I'm
but
also thinking,
if it's a eugenic, if they're going by like eugenics logic, it could be easily like we don't care about uh, black people, so could use it as an excuse to even further get rid of them. Granted, there is the whole dang it, we need all of the men we can possibly have. I guess you could just
yeah, they
use them
do.
as trades too, like trade black folks to other countries like South Africa to try to get white men.
We're not given any indicator that Rembrandt is treated any differently at all from Quinn and Arturo. Though it is possible that they have anti-miscegenation laws in place, that they just paired Rembrandt up with other black women. It would be. It wouldn't be that difficult actually when you think about the ratio. Um, but obviously we're not given any indicators of this. But bringing up Puerto Rico, the racial dynamic does kind of come up, and so they may want to have a breeding program like this in Puerto Rico, but possibly leave them in Puerto Rico and have them, breed exclusively with Puerto Ricans. Though this creates an interesting scenario because if there are more Puerto Rican men, I guess proportionately than on the mainland, then the Puerto Rican population is going to grow at a faster rate than the white male population on the mainland. So I also could see that causing some anxiety and them not necessarily pressing for Puerto Ricans to be part of this repopulation program, but allow them to be a bit more like Mexico.
Yeah.
Now, one aspect of this that the show doesn't give us any indicators of, but my specific alternate history scenario where they dedicate a lot more energy into biological weapons and less in reproductive science is a mixed bag for Puerto Rico, actually. So, one of the darker sides of the sexual revolution in the United States is that a lot of fertility products, be it birth control or even just kind of sterilization methods, were performed on Puerto Rican women without their foreknowledge. And there were movements of just massively sterilizing Puerto Rican women, and also just giving them birth control products that weren't ready yet, which led to a lot of them falling ill, a lot of them having permanent medical consequences. It's kind of something that we don't really think about, but Puerto Ricans were largely the guinea pigs for the American sexual revolution. And so in this world, we may see that, more Puerto Rican women would not be given these experimental medical treatments. And that might be part of why fertility science is not as developed in this world as ours. Especially if there's controversy around like how it's weaponized, then it would be bad PR to do it on Puerto Rico. On the other hand, Puerto Rican men weren't free from unethical experiments by the U.S. government. And if they are developing biological weapons more, it wouldn't be that different from how the U.S. released radiation in Puerto Rican prisons to see how radiological weapons could affect the body. And so we may see, you know, Puerto Rican men, particularly the most disadvantaged Puerto Ricans, find themselves to be the guinea pigs of horrific experiments that will benefit no one and ultimately lead to the destruction of more people. If the Y virus was developed at all in the United States, it's possible that a version of it might have hit Puerto Rico first, and that Puerto Rico actually does not have men. Even though it was more contained and didn't spread around the world, it's possible that, that happened. But I think in this scenario, the most likely development is that there is a repopulation bureau set up in Puerto Rico, and they're just repopulating people, or all the Puerto Rican are abducted to the mainland U.S., and the Puerto Rican women are just kind of left out on their own, or they largely are disinterested in Puerto Rico, not seeing them as real Americans because of their eugenics tendencies, and they're largely allowed to just sort of do what they want, and there's not like a strong repopulation effort. There's also the fact that, well, it's not easy for Puerto Ricans to sort of take to the sea and flee to other Latin American countries. They speak Spanish. Integrating into another country and never being found is going to be a little easier for Puerto Ricans than it would be for white or black Americans. And so that may be another factor into why the U.S. may not want to lay the pressure as heavily on Puerto Rico as they are on their own people. There are a lot of different ways it could go. Obviously, this is a horrific society, and so nothing that's happening is good. But there are a lot of different flavors of bad that, Puerto Rico can adapt to in this horrible world.
Yeah.
And I feel like the other question we often ask has a bit more of an obvious answer.
I guess there's I've slowly started to develop them into two separate questions, but very related. One being all else in the or the main problem of the episode being identical. Should they slide? I feel like the answer is obviously yes.
Yeah. I think it's obvious that, just from Arturo's remarks, they're not going to let him do his science, right? They're not going to gamble on the science of men in this more women-dominated society to try to fix their problem, much less for them to try to slide into another world. It'd be fun if Arturo could convince them. By the way, I can give you access to a whole other universe full of men.
I can give you access to literally infinite amounts of men.
But this is a society that, as Arturo put it, is more interested in his sperm cells than his brain cells.
Then the second one that I've been slowly developing the question into as well is assuming the main difficulty of the episode did not occur, but the world nevertheless they still landed on this planet but managed somehow to avoid the main problem. Would this still be a bad world to stay on? I am still inclined to say yes.
This is interesting. So they're going to be living on the lam. It's possible that Wade gets a house and keeps the guys in her basement. This would mean that Wade would have to do all of their shopping, including like getting other materials. But if Wade were to pitch off sliding as her own invention, while Quinn and Arturo are working in her basement, hidden from the world, then she may be able to secure the funding needed to build a sliding device. It's just a matter of how long can she keep this up and how well can she hide them. And that's sort of the scary part, right?
Yeah.
But I'd say that if they can avoid capture, it becomes more of a calculated risk. Where I think that part of this is that no one knows Wade from Adam, right? She doesn't have any degree. She's not like Otero or Quinn. But assuming that there
She's
are,
fairly good at getting jobs, it seems. Like she can.
yeah, and the science should speak for itself, right? If she like manages to find the right person and say, "Hey, here's a way to bridge to do the Rosenberg Bridge or whatever."
Einstein, Rosen, Podolsky.
Einstein, Rosen, stuff, yeah. Um, and they'd be like, this is actually plausible. We'll give you some for this lab. Then it's risky though because they want her to work in a lab with their scientists, right? They want
Yeah.
to keep Australians from getting a hold of it. I'm inclined towards it is too risky, but considering that their last world was literally a prison and the one before that was an active war zone, this is not the worst world to stay in. This is a pretty low bar.
Yeah, I.
But at the very oh, go ahead.
I mean, I would also think this is an absolutely terrible world to stay in, and I think that compared to the other worlds, the active war zone one is probably worse, maybe, but even that's probably just a maybe. But I'm more likely to say that that one's worse. Whereas this one, I can't imagine they would be capable of hiding for long, because if the sliders are in Wade's basement or attic or whatnot, Arturo has trouble keeping his mouth shut, um, and they were able to arrest another or one of the other major characters for having a toilet seat up.
I mean,
So,
on top of other suspicions, but yeah, fair enough. Let's
and if they get ill, it's like, okay, well now I have to take them to hospital or let them die, and that would be just as bad. So I'm inclined to they should just get out of there.
I guess there's also, to tweak it a little bit, what if the Australian and American agents didn't follow Wade to the house and they were able to flee to Mexico? At which point, Wade could theoretically either go back to the United States or stay in the United States. I doubt that they'd be too concerned about women hopping the border in this world. They might be trying to keep men from hopping the border. But, if Wade could work on her science, or not her science, on Quinn and Arturo's science with backing, and they're like safe in Mexico, then that might not be a terrible scenario. I think that there's a discussion to be had, especially, considering how bad some of these worlds are. But you're right in that this is a pretty terrible world, and
Yeah, their likelihood of becoming sex slaves is way too high to be comfortable.
as opposed to our world, where the likelihood of us becoming sex slaves is pretty low, but never zero.
Yeah, it's not zero, but it's a lot lower than this hypothetical Earth.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I have preference towards that.
yes. I too um, enjoy, Hmm. I mean, I suppose I don't enjoy the amount of sex I'm having right now, but I enjoy having an amount of say over the amount of sex I have. Because part of me is thinking, well, I mean, if it were me personally, I'm taken care of and I have lots of companionship, but it's still pretty awful. Uh, but obviously, yeah, this is a pretty bad setup. It's a very homophobic world. I think we just completely glossed over that, but that's also something when we're talking about like gender dynamics. Puerto Rico has its own LGBT scene, and that may not go well over there either. Either way, I was playing devil's advocate a bit, but yeah, I'm inclined to say, yeah, they should get the fuck out of there.
Yeah.
Obviously.
There's very little redeeming about this world. I guess there
I
are.
suppose there's the humanitarian argument of, hey, this world is doing terribly, and if you have a sliding device, you could actually do a lot of good for this world.
Yeah, that would rely on the capability of being able to create the sliding device.
Yeah. Uh, Granted, there's also the question of how would this world react to having access to another world? They don't need to abduct men, right? It's just sort of like, hey, our world doesn't have any men. We have all of these women that want to reproduce. We need some men to come over. I'm sure that if they just went into a normal world, there would be men who volunteered and they could just do it. But it's also within the realm of possibility that they immediately invade this other world and just start abducting men.
I am reminded,
So,
we didn't get to the episode yet, but I am reminded of an episode later where they go to a world that is just exploiting all of their resources like as quickly as possible, and this other world is they're developing sliding technology for the purpose of going into worlds that have the resources they do not, and basically quickly gaining control of it and taking this world, taking the other worlds hostage.
no,
I
they
could
don't
see that
really
happening in
suspect.
this, which is going into the other worlds and using the sliding device to either, most likely they'd have to go to some other to find some advanced world first, steal technology from there that's just passively available, and then using that to hold the other world hostage while they kidnap anybody they're near.
So little do they suspect that after the Sliders left, the Love Gods world developed their genetic and fertility technology and spread to other worlds and would become the Cro-Mags.
That would be very, very fast evolution.
Yes, it would. It goes against the lore entirely. Uh,
In fact, the
but
evolution
I
is
like
so
the
fast
idea.
it goes backwards in time. Granted, that's not entirely impossible given the lore that they establish, because there are worlds that have backwards time.
Yeah, it's a funny thought that all of the Cro-Mags were just genetically modified women from the Love Gods world. But that is just a theory. Not even. I don't hold this as a theory. um, a Sliders theory. Thanks for watching.
That is probably the end of the episode, though. Do you have any final thoughts?
Um, Pay respect to breeders, and do not call them breeders. They are an important aspect of our society. Parenthood is a wonderful thing that people do, and we should not exploit that. Generally, gender equality is good, for both men and women. Obviously, men have it a little better off in our world, and we get a little sneak peek at how things would not be so great if things were different. And so the golden rule applies here, right?
Yeah.
And don't force people into sex slavery. I know that there are a few of you watching that were totally about to do that, and they're like, oh, I hadn't considered it before Koki said, yeah, don't do that. Don't abduct people into sex slavery.
It is the official position of the podcast that sex slavery is bad.
Yes. I know this is going to cost us some subscribers, but we're going to stand by our principles on this one.
Have fun, everybody.
Take care.
Dang it, my chat's kiting everything.